When you think of suspension and you think of prestige, you have to think about Ohlins. So this is the TTX Coil, and instead of getting all nerdy, I'm just gonna put it on the bike and go ride it. So it is definitely very impressive within about 10 seconds. Every shock I ride, I definitely compare it to EXT because that's the best rear suspension I've rode to date. And this is definitely giving the EXT a run for its money within the first 30 seconds. So I put minimal setup into this TTX Coil, basically a 570 pound spring, a couple parking lot bounce tests to set the rebound. So I'm 2 clicks from dead slow in the rebound, which tells me this is a very responsible rebound range because I'm a heavyweight rider. The shock is pretty sensitive to rider input, but with any new suspension, you really got to take your time. I ride a Specialized Kenevo, and it has a 230/65 shock. It has a long yoke that likes to destroy coil shocks. So after countless emails to Ohlins, they assured me this shock was literally designed for this bike. It was the original Kenevo shock on the Generation 1 Kenevo. Now I had my doubts because it has a somewhat smaller stanchion than other shocks. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into coil shocks breaking. That's going to be another video. We're going to focus on the TTX here. If you're looking to buy the TTX Coil, there's a fairly good chance that you ride better than me, but that doesn't bother me. Just so you know, I like to ride low and slow, try to maintain good style from a surfing background. So basically this style of trail right here, pop and flow, using the suspension's full travel to get little pops and flow is my game. The Ohlins is very sensitive to rider input, and this is definitely going into my top 3 shocks within about 10 minutes of riding. The slow speed prowess of the TTX Coil is extremely impressive. First, small bump sensitivity on the Ohlins TTX, very impressive. We'll get all nerdy in a second after this ride and why it's so good in that small bump department. Coming into one of the most nastiest rock gardens I've literally ever rode through. The Ohlins definitely does not disappoint. This coil shock is truly impressive at this point. Probably beyond my riding ability. Passing through these horrible rock gardens, back to your pop and play. Absolutely excellent, because you can basically go through the entire stroke of the shock to generate awesome pop. For your average trail experience, there's excellent small bump sensitivity, and it's definitely above average. It does lack a few things that I'll touch on a little bit later. Moving further down this massive alpine descent, the Ohlins TTX Coil really likes to go fast. It is definitely a rewarding shock the faster you go. Sometimes shocks can kind of fall apart at higher speeds. Even though this isn't my favorite style of riding, I can really appreciate the damping that goes into this shock at higher speeds. Hopefully my blind ride test on the Ohlins TTX Coil has given you the confidence to get this shock because it is truly impressive. But it's time to get all nerdy on this one. So the blue knob is the low speed compression. But what separates the TTX Coil from literally every other mountain biking shock on the market is they have simplified high speed compression. We have a 3-position high speed compression lever, so if you need traction, go for the minimum. If you're on a jump line trail, maybe go for the mid. If you're going for pounding blue flow trails, click it into the firm mode and you can rest assured you are not going to have some hard bottom outs. As I've already experienced before, even in a poorly set up TTX Coil, in the low high speed compression mode, it did absolutely excellent. Now this is one lesson every mountain bike brand needs to learn. So Ohlins basically overbuilds the crap out of their shocks, and this is one of the few Kenevo approved coil shocks. I probably wouldn't be sitting here making suspension videos if Specialized had put the correct shock on this bike like a TTX Coil. Another super impressive thing about the TTX Coil is this shock is $800 at jensenusa.com. That is pretty darn impressive for the amount of performance you're getting out of this shock from the most prestigious name in all of suspension. If we take a look at the Fox DHX, it's $120 cheaper. And wouldn't you rather have a Lamborghini Urus than a Toyota RAV4? Now taking a look at that piggyback, whew, impressive. No water bottle fitments on your old school Levos, and definitely approved for your long yoke bikes. I was really concerned, so I did send Ohlins quite a few emails on this shock because it has a 10mm steel stanchion. 10mm is pretty small. You like to see 14, but there's a whole bunch of things that go into coil shocks braking besides the stanchion thickness. So the weight of the TTX coil at 15 ounces is pretty standard, but they do have some specialty coils. They're definitely on the lighter side, but they go in 25-pound increments. So the whole package, the Ohlins coil and the Ohlins shocks, at 745 grams or 1 pound 15 ounces if you're American. But remember, we're riding our bikes downhill, who cares about weight? The Ohlins damper body is pretty large, so the only aftermarket springs that are going to fit on this are EXT, RockShox, and the Spring Decks. The Ohlins shock is truly impressive, extremely small, simple, and robust. I wish all mountain bike suspension companies would build shocks like this. Back to the test track, equipped with a lot more information. So like I told you before, the Ohlins is super sensitive to rider input, to the point it's giving EXT a run for its money at this point. So my test track here may be a very simple set of trails, but I've rode every single damper on the market, so I can measure it up against basically every other brand there is. I really like the Ohlins. It's super sensitive to rider input, allowing me to get excellent pop, and it's just a really fun shock. But realizing most mountain bikers aren't all about style and going low and slow like a surfer, usually they're like after like silly Strava times, I went down that section as fast as I possibly could. And I have a special surprise for you. The Ohlins damper at high speed is on another planet.
Ohlins, it's fucking phenomenal when you're out of control going fast.
The Ohlins TTX high speed damping is absolutely phenomenal, like some of the best or the best I have literally ever felt. So if you ride at high speed, just go buy this shock and stop watching this video because it's great. And for me, low and slow, it's absolutely phenomenal too because it's a super responsive shock allowing me to pop and play. It does this. I don't know how it does the high speed damping, but the slow speed response rate is because there's a bladder inside of the piggyback. Now this isn't new technology, this has been in motorcycle shocks for literally ever. But a bladder, it has less friction and it makes the shock respond better to the rider's input. So if you want a bladder, it's EXT, DBO, or Ohlins. There is a whole bunch of similarities between EXT and Ohlins, but I want you to pay attention to the springs in the back. Both EXT and Ohlins utilize this like short spring on a 65 stroke shock. So what I'm going to do is put the EXT spring on the Ohlins shock. Another weird thing here is the E-Storia looks oddly similar to the TTX. The EXT coil fits right on the Ohlins damper. It is precisely the right height as the Ohlins spring. And the spring clips, it fits very good too. So another odd similarity here. So let's see if these shorter springs actually give better ride characteristic. I like to ride everything backcountry, trail center, trail riding, bike parks, anything and everything. So taking it out on a backcountry ride with the EXT spring loaded on there, there's no real benefit of a bougie suspension when you're riding like this. Any inline shock would be pretty much the same. But when things get chunky, that's when that extra price tag really pays off. The high-speed chundery section of trail, the Ohlins, is just absolutely killing it. This shock is phenomenal at high speed, like I told you in the last section. The question is here, is that shorter spring giving it more performance?
The small bump is way better.
Not only is the small bump better, the performance of the shock is actually better by running a shorter spring. EXT and Ohlins are way ahead of the curve from all the other brands. I'll be trying to fit EXT coils to every other one of my shocks from now on. So if you know more about that, please leave a comment, because I personally don't know the benefit of running a shorter spring, but better small bump, better performance, and it's lighter weight, so I don't see how you can go wrong with a shorter spring. Why isn't everyone else doing this? Carrying on my backcountry ride, you gotta know this. The best trails in the world are not on trail forks. They're down weird fire roads in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So let's see how she does on those epic secret DH lines. Thus far, every single style of terrain I've thrown at this shock, it has been a absolutely top performer. So this is a backcountry DH loamer following the natural contours of the mountain with not a lot of tires on it. It's kind of like riding on a pillow. And we have enhanced performance from the EXT coil and a phenomenal damper in the TTX Ohlins. Remember the 3-position high-speed compression lever on the Ohlins shock? Well, it's super easy to use, to the point you don't even really have to get off your bike. So this trail is so soft, it is like riding on a pillow. And I usually ride in full high-speed compression, so I flipped it up into the soft setting to see how it would do on this pillow style of trail. And basically the performance just went through the roof. It was even better experience than before. So whether you have this shock set up bad or good, you're still gonna have a great experience. Being the diversified rider I like to be, heading back out into a trail center, I bolted the spring decks back into the Ohlins TTX coil to see if the performance was less. The performance of the shock was, I'm gonna say 10 to 15% less with a standard spring. So I would definitely opt for an EXT or an Ohlins spring when putting it on this shock. After a few weeks of riding the Ohlins shock, I'm super impressed. Basically, it has never let me down. This section of trail was what sold me on the EXT. It pops and plays better than an air shock. Holding up the Ohlins to that standard, it is definitely slightly under EXT Storia internals, but I'm gonna say like 10 to 15% less. And don't forget, the Ohlins shock is way easier to set up. From the first day to the last, the Ohlins TTX coil was one of the best experiences I have ever had. The first day, not knowing how to set it up, it rode absolutely phenomenal. By slowly dialing it in and putting the correct spring on it, the performance just increased. I've literally learned more from riding this shock for 2 weeks than almost all the other shocks I've rode combined. What Ohlins does in this shock, it's extremely simple. That's what we need to get back to in suspension. Simple and high performing. 4-way adjustable clicker clackers are for marketing. High performance is a simple shock like the TTX. Now if you're kind of maybe more thinking EXT, you gotta click this video on the screen because I went on the Storia right afterward.